And typically what we want to do is we want to create a folder in the opening part, in the base part of the website, that we're going to store our XAP files. If you look in here, I have created an SL folder, and underneath that you'll see that I already have two, which I'm going to delete now, XAPs in there. And this is the area that we want our files to be deployed to. And that way we always have a common path for how to get there. Lowering this, I'm going to go into deployment and I'm going to add an item, and what I'm going to do is add a module. And I'm going to call it contacts grid to deploy. At this point, it adds the elements file and a sample file that we first immediately delete. Now we're going to want to tell this project that we want to deploy our feature to SharePoint. So our project output references, and that's the only reason why we have this. We go in here and we add, and we say that we want to be able to deploy Project Grid 2. And my apologies here. And it's also important to note that we want to deploy it as an element file. And we want to pick Contact Grid 2, which is the actual project that we're deploying. And we want to specify, automatically by default, it's going to want to call it by the project name. We want, for every project that we're going to deploy, we want it to go into the SL folder. At this point, now, there's one other main important part to note about the deployment project. And in there, in the properties, we want to go to SharePoint, and we want to click Enable Silverlight Debugging. And that is what wires it up with SharePoint so that we are able to hit the debug button and it will allow us to step through our code asynchronously. You see here it creates the elements file that gets deployed. There's our XAP file where it will land, and there's the directory that it will go. We are done with the deployment project at that time. So now we can go into this and quickly just drag something onto it. Just to be able to do our initial hello world type application. So we're going to say okay. And we're going to make our width equal to 150. And it looks like we probably better specify a height of. And there we are. At this point, right now, we can right-click on deployment, and we can hit deploy. And you see that it builds the file, creates a solution that also copies the file out to the directory. You can see it if you do it twice. You see on this second time around that found one deployment conflict, resolving conflicts, there is our XAP file that we have just deployed. Now the great part about this is that we have just deployed a Silverlight project out to SharePoint. Visual Studio has automatically detected that there was a file out there that existed already, deleted it and re-added it. And as this is a sandbox solution, it did not require any kind of reset of IIS or anything else. So now we go SharePoint Designer, and we refresh the page, and we see our context grid is now under our SL. Wanting to see this then, if we go to and create a new web part page, this is how easy it is to add a Silverlight web part that we have just built to a SharePoint site. So we say we want to add a new web part page. And we're going to call it demo. And we'll go ahead and give it, and we'll just store it in our site pages. Right off the bat then now we have a new web part page in our SharePoint implementation. And we can go ahead, click Add Web Part, Media and Content, Silverlight Web Part, Add. The URL is always going to be the same general path. It should be Sites, Demo, SL, and then the name of our package we find here, contextgrid2.xap. And there we are. There's our button. We also may want to do some customizations where we come in here and we say, okay, I don't want to call it Silverlight Web Part. I want to call it and I would like the, I'd like it to be a little bigger. I'm going to make it 800 by 600. There we are. When we stop editing, at this point, we have a web part page in SharePoint that we can browse to very quickly. So we can add a link to the side or whatever we want to do, but under Site Pages Demo, Hello World, our blank project comes up. Now we probably want this thing to be a little more interesting. So back in our site, once again, we have created a list, and we have had people go out and fill in our contacts list, various information, and we want to be able to display a data grid of this information that we can manipulate, add buttons to, sort, do, and use that as the starting place for how we can move around with our data. I'm going to go ahead then and pull up our Silverlight project. And at this point, we are able to deploy and we are able to debug. As soon as my laptop catches up here. Okay. And in here, let's go ahead and let's change our SAML. And let's just add a basic grid, a Silverlight control data grid. And we'll delete our button. And we will call it data grid contacts. And we will also set up the grid for demonstration purposes to go ahead and auto-generate columns. The reason why we're doing this is that the amount of material out in the world, books, Google, otherwise, there's quite a bit of material to be able to learn building rich UI with Silverlight.